Another world, another time, in the age of wonder.
You are listening to
Trial by Stone.
Trial by Stone!
Trial by Stone!
This is what I came for.
Your vital essence, the dark crystal.
I can feel something. Hear it almost.
Don't move.
Don't move? Where would I go?
Quiet!
Here's your host, Philip Mitchell. Hello and welcome to Trial by Stone, and this is episode 3 of the podcast for October 2014. And we've got a big show this month, with news and rumours of the Dark Crystal and Labyrinth sequels into the spotlight, and we have Toby Philpott on the show, with the interview coming up shortly. With no time to waste, let's get into the news the Crystal Bats have transmitted to us this month.
And begin, all the same, big change. Sometimes good, sometimes bad.
Crystal bats fly! Search the land! Search the water! Search the sky!
So in early October, the internet went crazy. First, there was announcements on the return of Twin Peaks, the Ghostbusters reboot, and finally, Labyrinth and Dark Crystal sequel developments. And it all started with an article on Variety by Dave McNary, with a report on Billy Crystal teaming up with the Jim Henson Company to write, produce, and star in the upcoming animated film, Witch Witch. Then, towards the end of the article, it briefly mentioned projects that's in development, including a Fraggle Rock movie and sequels for Labyrinth and the Dark Crystal. Most of the attention was towards the Labyrinth sequel news. However, it was denied by the Jim Henson Company via an article on Entertainment Weekly. However, Variety has updated the article and mentioned that while Jim Henson Company are working on a project based on Labyrinth, it isn't a sequel. For me, this seemed very non-news, which just became news to the media. Right now, I don't see a sequel to Labyrinth happening anytime soon, though the closest thing to a sequel of sorts is the Tokyo Pop manga Return to Labyrinth. And, if you haven't read it and you're a fan of Labyrinth, I'd suggest checking it out. As for the Dark Crystal sequel, that's old news. The film has been in development for over 10 years, and for me, I do have hope. I won't believe it until they start shooting the movie. It's been interesting to see the Dark Crystal mythology expanding with manga and graphic novels, the launch of an official website, and contests as well. I believe that all of this will eventually lead into a movie, though I'm not holding my breath and just simply wait and see. This month, BAM and the Jim Henson Foundation have organised a mammoth of puppets on film session, which includes a screening of The Dark Crystal. Brian, Wendy and Toby Philpott, as well as J.M. Lee, will be in attendance for the screening, and it's on the 24th of October in New York. More details at www.bam.org/puppets. For next month's show, there will be a roundtable discussion of the fan event with J.M. Lee and other guests to discuss about the night of the event. Stay tuned for more details on Facebook and Twitter. Now, for this month's show, I had an opportunity to interview Toby Philpott. He was one of the many puppeteer performers who worked on The Dark Crystal, as a Mystic, a Garthim, a Podlings, and more. He has gone through many other career paths, from street performer, juggling, fire eating, clowning, acrobatics, and a lot more than what I've just mentioned. Now let's go to the Podling village and chat to Toby on his work on The Dark Crystal.
It does actually seem, just from my own experience, just personal experience here, for the last sort of 10 years since I've been going out doing signings, it's almost always been Star Wars, even if at a sci-fi convention and so on. And I've always mentioned Dark Crystal as how I got the job. And I know Labyrinth has a kind of cult following with young girls, because it's a girls' coming of age movie, and most movies are boys' coming of age movies. So that seems to have quite a big cult But just a month, both Dark Crystal and Labyrinth there's been an increase of interest in the people at conventions I've been to. I don't know what it is. I mean, I know there's always been these rumours of a second film, and that's never going to happen, as far as I know. But it seems to come around. Maybe it's a new generation watching it or something. I don't quite know. But a year ago, I wouldn't have sold a Dark Crystal photo at a convention. And this year, I have a few out, and they're nearly always people go, "Oh, look, I'm not really a Star Wars fan, actually, but I love that film," and it's just, it seems to have turned a corner somehow.
Yeah, I think it has, yeah. I mean, especially, like, with the, I guess, I don't know if it's, like, especially with the new Star Wars movie that's coming out, how they're sort of going back to the old, techniques, I guess, of the past, with that JJ video that had, that everyone described that puppet as a very dark crystal creature, yeah.
Well, I mean, that's the structure of the puppet that walked across the background of that video is exactly like the junk woman in Labyrinth. The puppeteer is standing upright and the head is around about the stomach height. So you're operating the mouth this way rather than that way. And the puppeteer is hidden in the load on the shoulders, basically. So structurally, it's a very familiar object, to me. As soon as it walked on, I went, "Oh yeah, I know."
Yeah,
that looks familiar.
Exactly like that. Yeah.
There's only so many things you can do,
So thank you so much, by the way, for being on the show.
Oh, no worries. I like I say, I'm actually slightly more proud of Dark Crystal than I am of Star Wars. I don't normally say that out loud because people are so obsessed with Star Wars. But it was the first film I ever made, right? So I wasn't planning to be in the film business. I got in there by accident. I can tell you more about that if you want. But basically that, and also I was not only in pre-production, so I was there when they were developing costumes, but I also filmed it every day from the day one right through to the wrap. And normally when you work on films, you might get 3 weeks work or a couple of weeks, to be able to work on a film right from day one to the finish is exceptional. I've never done it since. And to be doing that with Jim Henson and Frank Oz as my teachers, I was learning how films work and how puppets work. So to me, that's the best memory, it's not as famous, but it's much more important to my life. That's the way it is.
Absolutely, yeah. And
if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I guess what's interesting is because of Dark Crystal, it had a very long kind of production schedule to make the show.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Because I guess it all started sort of in the late 70s. So you pretty much worked on it pretty much full time for a good 2 or 3 years, or? Well,
no, well, they'd been working on it. Yeah, they did. I came in at I went to an audition in sort of, I think it was September, October of 1980, and they were auditioning people for pre-production. So it was a very big call, and I didn't think I was going to be involved in it, but my mime teacher, I'd been doing mime and mask work to supplement the stuff I'd done before. And it was him that said to me, "You must go for this audition." And I went, "I don't do auditions. I'm a street performer. I don't." And he said, No. This is a one-off. They're advertising for acrobats, mimes, dancers, to do physical performers, to do big puppets. And he said, "There's no qualification for this. They're just looking for people who could do it."
Yeah. It seemed like they were just looking for anyone at that stage. Yeah.
Yeah. So he was actually I think he was going for the movement coach, because he'd done that before. So I think he wanted his students there as well, of course. He didn't actually get the job. Jean-Pierre Amiel got the job as the movement coach. But I ended up with the job. And they picked 10 people, and they said, "Now, 4 of you are going to work on the pre-production, developing the costumes and finishing all that. And the other 6 will come back next March, which would March 1981, to actually do the shooting." And so they made us compete again. We'd won the job, and then the 10 of us competed, and I squeezed into the 4. So I was in the nitty gritty. And then I had a back problem, and it's a real pain. I hadn't signed the contract at this point. It wasn't their fault. My back went out. I withdrew elegantly. Just, "I can't blame your training. I can't deliver the goods." And Simon Williamson took over. Yeah. So then I missed the Christmas while I was fixing my back and getting it sorted, and miserable because I thought I'd landed the job and then lost the job. You can kick yourself. But in March, I contacted them and went, "I'm fit, I'm well," and they took me back into the team of 10. So that was just the process of getting into it was hard enough. But it meant I didn't do so much of the costume fitting and so on. I did a little bit of that. I should explain the real reason that they wanted strange performers like us was that Jim, I don't think he ever said it to me explicitly, but by implication, he was aware that most aliens, in Star Trek or Doctor Who, aliens are humanoids with funny heads and funny hands. That's what they are. And it's a bit of disappointment. And he actually wanted to make a movie, first of all, with no humans in it, so you wouldn't see the scale. You couldn't guess how big anything was. And secondly, that the aliens should be so cunningly built and disguised that you can't see the human in them. You don't recognize them as humanoid. So that process of doing the mystics, for instance, where we're squatted down and hands over our heads and so on, or the Garthim, they were designed to not look like human beings. Not even, you can't even really see how it's done. And pod people are classic puppets, but the Skeksis are a mixture. When they're static and the puppeteers are working hard, there's a hole in the ground, and the puppeteers are half down under the floor. But when they're walking around, they're using little people like Mike Edmonds and people. So it's the magic of movies that they alternate between static puppets that are done by full-size Muppet performers and walkabout ones which are done by little people.
Yeah, no, it seemed like they used kind of every trick of the book in the puppetry book in regards to all the techniques that...
They use it. Well, I mean, it's an illusion, the whole thing. I think the original concept was it was a lot darker. Jim wanted to get away from doing Muppets. That was the first thing. And if you imagine the Creature Shop had already made Yoda, and everyone knew how Yoda was. You look at Yoda, he's just alive. You don't go, is that a little man in a mask or is that a puppet? You just don't. He's just Yoda. And that's really well done puppets. That's Frank Oz, of course.
Because, I mean, the Dark Crystal, I was just thinking about, like, with Yoda, if Yoda was sort of like a test of proof that, okay, if people really believe in Yoda, then they could imagine, then people can believe in a world that's full of puppetry. Do you believe that Star Wars is a result of that, or for The Empire Strikes Back?
Yeah, George Lucas and Jim were very close. Obviously, Jim had done Yoda. I think of Dark Crystal as a showcase of what else you could do with the same level of technology. And this is 1980s technology, so it was quite primitive. The controls we've got are like camera releases and things like that to make people's eyes blink. But they were sort of stuck together in a primitive way, really. But I think Jim wanted, two things. It was a kind of a showcase of what else he could do, but also he was always very experimental, And I think he just wanted to do something just a bit more different. The original concept was that there wouldn't be any English language either, not only no humans, but all the characters would speak their own languages, Gelfling language, Skeksis language, and so on. Now, whether they would have had subtitles or whether it was just going to be a real art house movie, it was going to be an alien concept. Now, the feedback from the producers and perhaps from George went, that's too strange, we are going to have to dub this stuff into English. And you can tell George's influence right from the beginning, in a country far away, the rolling credits. But I mean, someone decided it had to be a little bit more commercial than the original dream, which was to make a totally strange movie.
Because that was like based on, I think, the work print. And I recalled hearing about when they did the first preview screenings, and there was just like a negative feedback. Just for the audience not really understanding what's going on, just because they're all talking this different language. And like, I
like that original concept. I would have loved it.
I would love it if the Jim Henson if they were able to kind of restore it and restored like the work print as sort of like an extra, like a special, not like just an added special feature.
It's all there. I imagine the material's there, but it would mean dubbing it, because obviously on the set, the Skeksis were speaking English. The puppet people were doing English. So to do his concept, they would have had to dub it afterwards into the strange language. You know what I mean? I mean, Ogra was dubbed later. She was spoken on set by Frank Oz, and then Billy Whitelaw put a voice on, because Frank doesn't have a big range of voices. He said that. I always spoil Yoda for people by saying, if you listen very carefully, you'll hear a mixture of Fozzie Bear and Miss Piggy in the voice.
Yeah.
Because Frank is behind it. And, some people are real voice impressionists.
Yes.
And some people can do a little range, but actually you can kind of hear The illusion works perfectly because the puppet takes over the character. But once you are watching a film and listening carefully, there's only so much range you have. Frank's voice works beautifully for the Chamberlain Skeksis. That's him doing all those, I can't do that. But that's Frank doing it, and it fits beautifully. But he wanted Ogra to be disguised, so they camouflage that. Very aware of their limits, and they were very keen to get it just right. I remember one day when we were watching the rushes, because we were all invited to go to the rushes, which, nowadays you can watch video playback, but then you were watching stuff that was processed overnight, and everybody was invited. It was not compulsory. You weren't ordered to. It was after work, and normally in movies only producers and directors get to watch that stuff. But because Jim was so aware that puppeteering is quite tricky to know what you were doing and how well it worked, he invited everybody to the theatre. So there was a big social event. There'd be 100 of us in the thing, and you're watching repeats. You're watching 5 takes of the same scene. It can be kind of boring. But I remember one night there was a Jen scene, and a little thing came up, like on the silent movies, with Mr. Henson apologising for how wimpy Jen's voice is. He's aware of this, and he will be dubbing it later. And they would actually make that a social event and a funny time, because they worked on keeping a creative atmosphere and a fun atmosphere. Because 2 things can happen in film studios: you can be terrified, which freezes the behaviour, or bored, which doesn't help. And the Muppets keep. Well, that's why you can feel it when you watch the old Muppet TV shows, the sheer glee of the whole thing, And they kept that atmosphere going on Dark Crystal. Plus, it was an adventure for everybody, so no one was better qualified. I mean, although it was my first film, Jim was doing something he'd never done before. So there was that real adventure that if anyone's got a bright idea how to get this to work, then contribute. Don't hold back and think someone's in charge. And that feeling that you could actually make a comment or a contribution was amazing.
Yeah, and was there any contributions that you made during the shoot of the Dark Crystal, or even in the pre-production stage, or yeah?
Well, yes and no. I mean, because our main job was to do the Garthim and the Mystics. So the Mystics, we did a lot of workshopping on our own, and then Jim and Frank would drop in and to see what we'd been doing. And that involved both movement and, creativity for things like they actually have 4 hands, for instance. Now, mostly they're single performers, so you've only got 2 hands. You've got 1 hand in the head, so you've only got 1 free hand, and the other hands are all dead, really. So, but for certain shots, for instance, we would sit around. I think there's a shot where one of them is playing the harp, and there's another puppeteer hidden in the back putting his hands out, so you've actually got 4 hands going at once. So that kind of creative input we would be doing in our development process before it went in front of the camera. And that was the pre-production stuff where we contributed. And just things like the Landstriders didn't exist. When I first joined the crew, they hadn't got around to Landstriders, and we were workshopping to try and invent weird creatures. I mean, 4 of us would stand back to back, link arms, and try and make an 8-legged spider, and then go, could you put a costume over that?
Yeah.
We'd be running out the studio doing weird things. And Robbie Barnett came in. He was another clown like me, another street performer, but he was a stilt walker. And he came in with his 6-foot stilts, just to show them, and said, and you could put front legs on this. And then he started wandering around, and somebody went, aha, woof, look at this. Yeah, let's build something around that, So Landstriders actually appeared after we'd started working. So that's the kind of level of involvement we had. Once it started shooting, it all calms down, of course, because you've got schedules and the various departments are competing, of course. The art departments are who gets finished first, because if our stuff's finished, we can show it. But, if they're shooting this scene, so the pressure comes on them because it's £500 a minute or something to be shooting, and that's in the 80s. So if you waste 5 minutes, you've just wasted, a fortune. So then the pressure goes on, and you don't start improvising so much. I mean, you may contribute a solution to a particular problem. Like in the Pod People, for instance, the job I was given was a foot juggler.
Ah, yes,
and I had a problem with that because I was off rehearsing it for a couple of weeks. What he is, the foot juggler is lying on his back, on another puppet's back, right, with his feet in the air. And I know gravity is very hard to simulate, especially on strings. but I practiced it and I got it perfect. I had it perfect. And then on the day, one of the other puppeteers, I can't remember who it was, but anyway, one of the other puppeteers takes over the bottom puppet. And because he's got nothing to do, he feels he ought to do something. So when I'm going to kick, he boosts. Well, if he boosts, the strings go slack and the gravity goes off. And I was trying to shout down, because you've got 150 people on the set. I'm going, don't do that. To shout to a senior puppeteer, don't do anything, is really hard. So the take they used is one where the strings are wrong, to me. I mean, it's just quality control. And I didn't mind because it's in the background. We did a couple of good ones. We did a bad one. But everyone else was writing the bad one for me.
Okay.
And you see?
Yeah.
So I didn't mind, because when I saw it on the screen, I go, ooh, ouch, because you watch your own bits. But it didn't matter. And then one day I watched it on TV once, and they've got a pan and scan version. So instead of the wide shot with me up in the background, they go to close up of me doing it badly. So, and now I don't even mention that that's me doing it, because it looks as though I'm not very good. Film is always a compromise. If you've got a scene with 15 people in it, the chance that everybody and the lighting and the sound, everybody at once, they choose the least worst, really, of the available footage. There's no point going to the continuity and going, I wasn't very good in that, can we do it again? Because it just won't happen. You're just not that important. And that's part of the learning curve, of doing movies. You suddenly realise you're not actually very important. You'd like to be perfect.
Yeah. Like it is one of my favorite scenes. Yeah, the Podling party, just all these Podlings are just.
Well, it's very, it's a bit Muppety. It's the nearest thing to Muppets they've got in there. Really. Yeah. But it's a lot of fun, and there's so much detail it doesn't really matter. But the first time you watch a film through that you've worked on, you can't help but look at your bits. It's very hard not to, because you don't really watch the movie the way other people watch the movie. You can remember the Wednesday you did that, or that you weren't feeling very well, or now I've watched it more or less like an ordinary person, and I still like it. I think I would have preferred it weird. I think I would have liked it even dark. It goes a little bit slack in the middle to me, just the pacing of it.
Yeah, just a tad slower and
just a little. But that's also familiarity with it, and it wasn't that big a success at the time. When it came out, it's been one of those slow sleeper cult building things. But to me, it was such an extraordinary experiment that one of the reasons it's coming back, I think, is because now people are getting bored with CGI. I mean, they've even told Star Wars you've got to do practical effects. That I think people are going back to that stuff now and going, look at that. That's virtually, there's almost no CGI in that at all. There's one or two little graphic effects with light and stuff, but it's basically all really there and three-dimensional.
Yeah, and I don't know whether it's like, if it's the people that are sort of running the studios, they're sort of the ones that grew up with all that stuff in the 80s and sort of there's almost coming full circle in that regard, maybe. Yeah, I think so, and because grown-ups now can watch it, because it's a bit dark for a kids' movie, really. There's some sinister bits, but it's also a bit childish for an adult movie. So it's one of those sort of, I think now adults watching it with their kids, it kind of works. And kids are a little bit less scared now than they used to be, even 30 years ago. Kids are a bit more sophisticated, so. Yeah. Like, I remember, like, when I watched it as a kid, I was like scared of it, with the Skeksis and
when they tear this Chamberlain's clothes off, and it's like, wow, this is woo.
Yeah, I know, this is pretty full on.
They're all cackling away.
Yeah.
But it's good natured. In the back of it, it's good natured, So.
Yeah, and even like watching it recently, so I guess growing up with it, like I guess as a filmmaker, like I really appreciate it more, kind of now than ever, because of all the work that you done, and Jim Henson and Frank Oz, just to creating that whole world like from scratch, essentially. That's unlike any other film, and still kind of is to this day.
Well, the detail is extraordinary. I mean, the amount of money that went into that. He I don't know if you know the background, but basically Jim wanted to make this movie, and Lou Gray didn't really want to fund it. I mean, this is only hearsay, but I gather Lou Gray was going, why would I pay for a film like that? It doesn't sound very commercial. And Jim said, okay, you can do this thing, but you have to do me another Muppet film. So you can do the both. I'll fund them, but I want at least one more of your commercial ones. That's why, yes, it developed over a long time. But Jim got together an extraordinary team of builders and designers. When we went to, once they'd hired the performers like us, we went to the creature shop, which was opposite his house. It was a huge building, and it was just amazing. I mean, every single thing. The hands for the Mystics, for instance, have an extra 2 joints on here. So we're wearing, there's a leather strap here with tendons like on the back of your hand, running right up there, so that we could then do these gestures but bigger, you know, like long fingers. And you'd get one guy that was doing that, and you'd have another guy who's doing radio-controlled eyes, and you'd have another guy doing, and then there was the skin and the costumes, and just so many specialists, and a lot of them had never done films or puppets before. So he'd drawn in all kinds of talents to put together, and I think it's that detail that means that, for instance, I haven't got Blu-ray, but I imagine that if you look at Dark Crystal, where you can see even more detail, it will never go wrong. I mean, the closer you look, the more detail there is.
And that's why I'm like, I kind of started up a thing on the Dark Crystal forums about, you know, what would you like, you know, if they did like a 4K Blu-ray version of the film, you know, even get more detail than you would on the Blu-ray. So even, the thought of that's just, you know, a little bit exciting, you know, even though it'd be many years before, you know, if it does happen. That's
it's hard to tell, but I just know that when you were really there, I couldn't believe the detail. I was going, surely this isn't going to show. But somehow you're aware of the detail. You're aware of the fact that those costumes, just everything, the Skeksis cutlery, you know, all the stuff on the fingertips, all the jewelry and things, it's all been beautifully made by some specific person, one specialist doing that, and the best in their field for everything. There are very few films, so it must have been quite a high budget, but there are very few films with that much attention to detail, even now, I think. But I mean, I didn't realise how spoiled I was to be doing that as a first film, to know, you know, because since then I've been on films where it was quick and dirty. Do you know what I mean? You need good enough and move on. To be working with such perfectionists was extraordinary.
Yeah, like every shot had to be really spot on.
Yeah, well, you know, as best as you get. Like I say, nothing's ever quite what you imagine when you're doing it. There's always a slight disappointment because your imagination, you know, is perfect. But yeah, apart from the big characters, the reason it was fun for us, all of us, the puppeteers, was that we were never sitting around in our dressing room doing nothing. And we were working all the time, so that we were on the set. When we weren't doing our big creatures, each of us was assigned to one of the Muppet people, because these are 3- and 4-man puppets, right? And I got picked to be on Jim Henson's team. Now, I don't know what I did to deserve that. I like to think he picked me because I was the best, but it's possible that he's such a modest man that he let everyone else pick first and went, I'll take the leftover. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's also temperament, you know. If you're there's a couple of loud and crazy guys, and they would need people of the same temperament. Jim picked me and Robbie Barnett, and we're both vegetarian, peaceful introverts, you know.
Okay, yeah.
I know I'm being out, but, you know, temperamentally we had similar kind of characteristics. And I think if you've got to be nearly telepathic to be doing a character, for instance, on Jim's characters, he's doing the head with his right hand, doing the left hand of Jen and Ritual Master and things, and I'm just stuck in his armpit here doing the other hand. Now, if, you know, you can see with my hands now, if these hands don't actually match up very well, it's going to look silly. Now, there are times when you don't want it to be the same gesture. There are times when important things are happening, and you have to rehearse this stuff, you know, and you're not doing it with your own hands, by the way. You're doing it with a mechanical hand on the end of a grip gun, you know, kind of claws. And Jim was so wonderful to work with. He never lost his temper at me wrong, even if you had to do another take. You know what I mean? I'm not saying I did wrong all the time, but to get that just the way you want, you know, I could just accidentally put a hand in front of the face. You know what I mean? And it would be wrong.
Yeah, like he was happy to take his time throughout most of the shoot. Yeah,
he was just a perfect teacher, and he never lost his cool. He would say something like, I don't think that really works. How about, should we try this? You know, as opposed to that's wrong. do something else. And if I was really stuck, he would find a solution. Like he'd say, well, he'd say, just hang on to the jacket while I do the talking. Do you know what I mean? He was always a creative and positive person about it all. And Frank Oz came over to me one day and he said, it's boring, isn't it? And I said, what? And he went, just being stuck in his armpit doing one hand. I went, no, it's fascinating, it's exciting, And he went, no, it's boring, don't tell me. He said, I did it for 2 years before they gave me my own puppet. Been in Frank's, been... But that's what they were like. They were positive about everything, and they kept this lovely energy going. So, that's you can tell I dearly love them both, but particularly Jim, because I worked right next to him, sharing sweat for months. Yeah, he was just a lovely guy.
Yeah, and what was it like meeting, I guess, Jim Henson for the first time? Was that during the audition process, or...?
Just rolling it back a little bit, my dad was a puppeteer, and his second wife was a puppeteer. And I never worked out whether it helped me get the job that I had puppet experience. I didn't want to be a puppeteer, I was a juggler and acrobat and magician and stuff. But
yeah, neither did Jim Henson,
I know Jim did come over to me one day and he said, do you know, I think I know your mother. And I went, no, you probably know my dad's second wife. And he went, oh, all right, yeah. So he must have thought of me as part of the puppet subculture, because there is a puppet subculture in the art. And puppetry was never considered an art form. The arts does not pay for puppets. And I was working in circus, which is another art form that they don't consider art, because they like opera and ballet and, So Jim was one of the first people that got people to take puppets seriously. Since then, the Arts Council now does recognise it as an art form. But back then, I think Jim was hiring every puppet talent he could find in the country, not just builders but also operators. And I think I lucked in slightly, because to have the puppet experience, to be able to do puppets without fear, do you know what I mean? But also to be physically fit, because I was an acrobat and a mime, I could do that, the uncomfortable jobs as well. And I just happened to be in the right place at the right time with the right skills. I really didn't set out to do that. But I think he was subsidising the puppet industry, because if you think you take people who are underpaid and doing their own little thing, and you just take them for 3 months and you pay them £500 a week, well, whatever that would be $2,000 a week now or something. He's basically subsidising the art form that he loved right the way across London. There were just so many puppet people in there, and same on Labyrinth. So I think I was cheating slightly. I think I was bluffing. I was wasn't really the thing that I was dedicated to. But yeah, it was just a great experience. And it worked well for me, just on a personal level. I just had a son, and he was, he's not quite 2 years old. I needed more money than a street juggler would make, and the money arrived at the right time, and all that sort of thing. So it is just one of the better times of my life, that working on that film. But some of it's really silly. Apart from, I get a credit as the Alchemist. Now everyone gets a credit, but they couldn't possibly credit what we did, because if we worked for, I think it was nearly 6 months, and very rarely sitting in our dressing room doing nothing. So as well as the Alchemist and the Garthim that I was doing, and then Jim's things, the Jen and the Ritual Master.
And the pod people.
Yeah. Then everyone would get background things. So if they're walking through the forest, there'd be all these strange creatures, little creatures coming out the stream, and I might be in the background with a butterfly on a wire just behind a tree going, making a butterfly fly. You're never not doing anything. And some of them are really silly ones. It's a split second in the film. I think he's walking through the woods at some point, and these propeller flower things take off.
Yeah, in that sort of swampy. Yeah, I think it was in that swamp environment.
Yeah, swampy.
Yeah.
They just fly away. Well, they tried pulling them up with a string. They got up in the ceiling and they had a string on them, and they tried pulling them up, and because they just swung around, and they couldn't figure it out. So then they decided they were going to film it in reverse, and they sharpened the tips of them, and we were going to go up in the ceiling right near the hot lights, and have one in each hand and spin them and drop them like playing darts, and get them to stick in the ground. And they filmed it in slow motion and backwards.
Yeah.
And we spent the whole afternoon on the second unit doing that. There were about 8 of us up there. I don't remember exactly, but, half a dozen of us up there, each with 2 of these things. And you go, ready, get set, go! Because to make it slow motion, the camera's going really fast. So it's running a lot of film, and it's very expensive. So we're on the second unit doing this. And, of course, any one of them doesn't stick in, and you've blown the shot. So it was like playing darts. You're trying to get yours to stick in, because, of course, if it bounced off, then in reverse, it's doing something peculiar. That's how much detail goes into, like I say, it's 3 seconds on the screen, and it was half a dozen of us for 6 hours, I think, playing darts.
Just for half a second shot.
But, you'd go to work, you'd never know what you're going to be doing going to work. Another of the funny ones is in the castle, there are these little spider things that run around the ground. They just, and they were things from a joke shop. They were just a little metal thing with 2 legs. You wound them up, and when you let them go, the legs go, and they just run about the room. They'd cover them with feathers and fur. They had boxes of them, and if you weren't doing anything on that shot, you just hid somewhere in the corridor with a couple of these wound up, ready to go, and they go, ready, action, and you just let them go. And of course, they're random things. They just bounce about. And they do silly stuff. They might run around in circles, or they might run into the wall and go smack, Yeah. But we were having fun. There's one in the banquet where they tried to get one to run right along the table with all the Skeksis stabbing. They're all afternoon trying to get a clean run in one go. Actually, there's an edit there because we just could never do it. It always jumped off the table or something. But that's how much fun we were having, and how much attention to detail. They're going, well, let's just try this. If we can't get it, we'll cut it and we'll do 2 or 3 bits. But it would be great if we could just get one to run along the top of the table. Yeah. But these little details, they're funny now. They're even funnier when you're doing it. You're going, am I really being paid a lot of money to wind this thing up and let it run across the corridor? I mean, is this a skill or what is this?
Yeah. And I guess you played a Mystic and the Garthim and Podlings and all that kind of stuff. What was probably the most challenging out of the whole puppeteering, with the Garthim or the Mystics?
Well, they're different things. Again, temperament is part of it. Being a quite a slow, quiet person, I enjoyed being a mystic, and I can do a deep squat without my heels coming off the ground. I mean, I'm fairly fit, so I would sit in there patiently. And because we couldn't see anything. Nowadays, again, you'd have a miniature camera in the forehead and a little thing on your goggles. And we were actually working blind in there, so we had to mark all the moves out, and then just when the head's down, just do it. I really liked being a mystic. Temperamentally, it suited me to sit there patiently on my little stool, trancing out, because it's quite painful and uncomfortable. You have to go into a kind of a trance to play the character, and it sort of matches the character, right? So there were a couple of lively guys that weren't so flexible who were having a terrible time in there. They hated it. But we had a Turkish guy called Hus, who hated being a mystic, loved being a Garthim, because he was a muscular guy and he was energetic. And of course, I can do a Garthim, but not like him, because acting through a puppet, you've really got to put the energy through. You're covered in costume, and it's quite hard to transmit the energy through that.
Yeah, you'd have to put almost twice as much work,
Yeah.
Bringing it
absolutely.
to life, yeah.
So, for instance, to give you an idea, I can tell you which one he is, because mostly they're anonymous. But when they break down the pod people's hut where they're having the party, it's Hus that comes through the wall, because these things, we'd have the big leggings on all the time. Then they'd put this shell on, which weighed about, I don't know what it was, 70 pounds, I don't know, 50 kilos, I'm not sure, heavy anyway. And then you'd be wandering around in these things with these big counterbalanced arms, which are quite a lot longer than ours, and have blades on, or the claw. And you're swinging these around. Now, you could break someone's leg with this thing. I mean, if I'd swung it around like that without thinking, I could easily hurt someone. So we each had a minder who would tell us what we're doing, and we'd only put the helmet on for the actual shot. Again, we were blind once we had the helmet on. Well, virtually blind, we could just see that much. So they said to Hus, they brought Hus down, they brought us all down actually, but they said to Hus, they showed him this plaster wall and they said, would you like to smash that down? And he went, just for once, not being careful with the blade, but actually, can you smash that down? We'll get all the people out of the way, And he was having such a fabulous day that day. He went there, they've just let him do the thing he's always wanted to do. But you can feel it in the shot when he comes through that wall. It's genuinely scary. That's a monster out of control.
Yeah.
I might have been able to do it, but I suspect the energy that he puts into it is what you feel on the screen. I mean, I'm quite happily being a Garthim around the background, shuffling around. That final pow, comes through, because it's the same with puppets. With an ordinary single puppet, you've got to put all your acting up there. It's not just like wearing a mask here and your body adds to it. The skill of it is putting all the energy up there. Down the bottom, there's this switched off person performing, probably looking at the monitor to see what they're doing. Sometimes pulling faces if they've got to make the voice a bit strange, you're pulling your face. But essentially, all of your energy is going up the arm. So when you're in with those big characters, you're amplifying what you do. And that's where you need a director to tell you that's not big enough. It's you think you're doing something massive, but actually it's not coming across. I've been in a gorilla costume and it was the same. You have to do everything much. It has to be like this to look the way you imagine you're doing. What you're doing is too timid and too small. So me personally, I found Garthim challenging in the sense that it was very hard work, and it's also not my temperament. I don't mind playing baddies because I've played Jabba. I felt like a mystic, and a mystic. Once we were doing mystics, I could push that out.
Yeah.
I could feel that glow coming.
Yeah, it felt right at home for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
But when you saw the Dark Crystal, at its premiere or for the first time, like what was your like reaction or thoughts on it? Like,
well, first of all, I saw bits I'd never seen filmed, because although most of it was done where we were around, there were second unit things. The stuff on the boat was done out in the lake, for instance. There were one or two things that were a slight disappointment, just because I'd forgotten bits. On day one, when they shot the Mystics in the circle, my head wasn't quite working properly. And although I had my thumb, the jaws, you can have positive jaws where you have to push it to open, or you can have ones where you push it to close, right? And mine was pushed closed, and I'm in the foreground, and it was slack. So he's actually there with his jaw open, like a little bit, And I didn't see it until the rushes. And once I complained to the guys building it, they fixed it. So the very opening shot, it's me going, oh no, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Most of it was wonderfully impressive because I'd never seen the full edit. Like I say, you tend to watch your own bits, but to see the full performance put together was exciting, because I'd never seen a film that I'd worked on put together. And of course the music and other things which we hadn't experienced. And some of the special effects, the lights, they're just one or two things that they've added that weren't there on the set when we were doing it, or that we didn't get to watch in the rushes. So my first impression was extremely proud to have been part of it, to be sitting in the crowd with all those people, because everyone cares about their bit. The lighting man's watching the lighting, the makeup woman's watching the makeup.
Yeah.
It's like you have to watch it more than once before you really, really get the hang of it. But we were very proud of it. Did think it was a little bit of a difficult movie. I suspected it wasn't going to be a smash hit, because it's still a little bit strange.
It is.
I like strange, but I thought it was a bit demanding, shall we say?
Mm.
But yeah, that first watch through was really amazing. And I just when I did Dark Crystal, I thought it was a one-off job. I just went, like I've occasionally done the TV. As it happened, because the same crew, the same film studio, and the same management people were making Return of the Jedi next in the same. Then I was offered the job of Jabba, and I thought I'd graduated from being a small part player to a feature player. Not with the Hensons, but thanks to their training. So by the time I watched Dark Crystal, I'd already done the Star Wars film, and I was starting to think I was in the film business. I'm like, that's what I do for a living. Of course, I didn't work again for another 8 months after Star Wars. I was sitting around waiting for the phone to go. I didn't want to go back to juggling in the streets because I was in the film business, and nothing happened. So going to watch the preview was a reminder of how I felt. I am now part of the film business. Look, all these my friends, they're all in the film business. So there was that lovely camaraderie, you know, the feeling of fame and fortune. But of course, when people said, "Are you working?" you go, "No."
Not at the moment.
Like all that sitting around waiting.
Yeah.
So yeah, mixed feelings, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, I'm still proud of it, and I still occasionally watch it. Not that often, you know. I mean, my partner's never even watched it. She's not that interested in what I was doing in the 80s.
Okay.
It's not, you know, it's not my sort of thing. Fantasy feature films. I go, well, you're not even interested in what I did. Okay, I don't care. You know, each their own. I don't want to drag people through it.
No.
But no, it's good enough that I still watch it for my own amusement. And now I can watch it without cringing at my own little bits, you know.
Yeah, like, because every time I watch it, like, I always get a different kind of experience, or, you know, notice something that I never, you know, seen the first time. Yeah. 100 times.
Well, but it's that thing of there is so much detail there that you know, you can shift your attention and see a different version. I do prefer the DVD to the pan and scan TV version, though. I was disappointed by the way they changed the focus, but again, that's it's out of our control. That I'd love to see it in the cinema again. I haven't seen it in the cinema for a while because I think it deserves the big screen.
It does, yeah.
You know, TV screens are only so good, really. I know people are used to them now, but the first time to see it, we saw it on, you know, we saw it in the Leicester Square on a really big screen with a really big sound system, and that was fabulous. That was just fabulous, you know. Yeah.
I mean, for me, like, even, you know, I was born in '87, so I was sort of grew up in sort of the VHS era of, you know, watching a lot of movies on VHS. But I did get the opportunity to see the Dark Crystal, I think, in the early 2000s in Melbourne, which was pretty great. And recently, another cinema, the Astor Theatre, they've started screening the Dark Crystal as well, which in the past they always screen the Labyrinth at least like a couple of times a year, and they started recently showing the Dark Crystal because everyone's been demanding it for such a long time. I mean, it is great, to see it, to watch on the big screen, you know, the way it was meant to be seen.
And with a gang of people, you know, there is a different thing to watching it at home and stopping for coffee and putting on pause to answer the phone. And, you know, there's something about sitting in a cinema with a couple of hundred other people.
Yes, yeah.
Who are fans. You know, I mean, it's different if in modern cinema with people fidgeting and answering phones, it's horrible. But because I saw it a couple of years ago, I think I saw it in a local art cinema. And it was just a room full of fans, you know. And they'd actually asked me, it's our local art centre, they actually asked me if I'd do a little Q&A afterwards as well. So I was not only watching it and memorising bits, but also, you know, listening to the crowd response. So that when I got up to do the Q&A afterwards, I could actually pick on things. You may have noticed this, and I, you know, realising which bits work for people. And when they're fans, it is a different audience. They do already know it by heart. They have their favourite scenes. But it's lovely watching, just the enthusiasm of a couple of hundred people is a different thing to watching it at home.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. Especially like with some of the scenes. I'm just trying to think like of scenes that pick up to me, you know, seeing it in the big screen, and one of which is probably the Chamberlain's whimperings and I guess the shock when you know, when Fizgeek just pops out of nowhere. And it's so funny because even though, you know, I've seen this film so many times, but every time I watch it, like, I'm still trying to anticipate when Fizgeek's going to come out, and I can never get it right.
No.
It's going to be now.
Well, you know, if it's well done, it'll catch you every time.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that's the other stuff that I don't know much about.
No.
That's editing and directing, isn't it?
Of course,
and timing.
Yeah.
I mean, like, the jokes are still funny. And, you know, it's, I know they weren't trying to be funny, but they can't help but be funny. I mean, the Chamberlain's Weasley ways... He just makes me laugh. It's just, there's something about, and he's supposed to be a baddie, and he is a baddie. He's a very scary baddie.
He is, yeah.
But he's still funny as well, you know.
Yeah.
It's clever stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity to be able to chat to you about the Dark Crystal.
Oh, no worries.
You've already taken too long, Gelfling. Hurry!
At last, the crystal calls.
It is time to return to the castle.
The crystal calls! To the crystal chamber!
Well, that's all the time I have for this month's Trial by Stone. Big thanks to Toby for being this month's guest. If you want to contact myself about the show, send me an email at trialbystonepodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/trialbystonepodcast or on Twitter at trialbystonepod. If you enjoyed the show and think that others would like it too, then write a review on iTunes and help other Dark Crystal fans find out about the podcast. The more reviews there are, the more new listeners will find out about the show. I hope you all enjoyed this podcast and come back for the next episode of Trial by Stone.